Hey, I'm Ian.
And I'm Mary Reynolds. We're twins. Do you know what would have happened if she'd have gotten to that key, you gobshite?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm your host, Chade Arena. Pixar has some of the best movies of all time, and I'm not even talking about just animated movies. I mean all the movies ever made. Pixar holds strong and has been embedded in the hearts and minds of kids all over the world. I still remember seeing movies like Finding Nemo and Incredibles in theaters. And one of these greats, of course, is Inside Out, which is a movie about a prolapsed butthole. I'm joking. Of course, the movie is about a girl whose emotions start getting out of control, which leads to a whole bunch of crazy stuff and uncontrolled things happening, which eventually brings everyone closer together. Classic Pixar. And leave it to the internet to take this heartwarming story and find the dark corners hidden inside of it. That's why we got today's list of top 10 scary Inside Out theories. Make sure you stick around for the whole list because I'm going to be reading out comments from the top 10 scary abandoned prisons video. And we would love it if you guys would like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell. Also, follow Most Amazing Top 10 on Instagram and Facebook. It's a great way to get to know myself and the other hosts just a little bit better. And without taking any longer, let's get into this list. Number 10. Riley was about to be bipolar. In this Disney Pixar classic, we have Riley, who's the host of 5 different primary emotions that make up who she is: joy, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger. Later in the movie, we see that everyone has these emotions, but certain types take center stage for people, giving them core memories associated with these emotions, and this helps build their personality. Now, with the main character of the movie, Riley, we see that she has 2 primary emotions which take hold of most of her decisions: joy and sadness. By the end of the movie, this is resolved and she is balanced out. But what if the movie ended in a different way? What if at the end of the movie, Riley didn't get off that bus she was on while she was running away from home? What if she ended up running away from home and she was on the streets? This would lead to her probably having a mental breakdown, and poor little sweet Riley would be struggling with her mental health for the rest of her life. That would have been a little bit of a dark twist for Pixar, but hey, they did kill Marlin's wife at the beginning of Finding Nemo. Number 9. Bing Bong is a dead sibling. Halfway through this flick, we come across Bing Bong, who's the name of Riley's almost forgotten imaginary friend that is also the name of my buddy's bong when we used to be roommates. We used to be like, hey man, pass me the Bing Bong dude, I'm about to get binged. Throughout some flashbacks, we see Bing Bong playing with Riley in all sorts of ways, the two of them going on adventures. While some people think that the representation of Bing Bong in Riley's brain is just her covering up the death of a brother or sister. The loss of her sibling could have been too much for her little brain to handle, and so she made up a character to replace him with. This way she could deal with the trauma. This could be why the whole family is moving at the beginning of the movie. Living in the home where they were raising a kid that passed away may have been too much for the family. Or maybe a little girl who grew up in Minnesota really does have an imaginary friend who has the accent of an erotic Jewish man from New York. Who knows? Number 8. The dump is a metaphor for Alzheimer's. Inside Out pretty much breaks down emotions into working in a factory and an office. The dump is where your memories go when they're not needed anymore. And that's what happens when you get Alzheimer's. Well, if this was the Inside Out world, most of those things would go flying into the dump. I'm pretty sure that's the same thing that happens when you take a big hit in football. I wonder what the Inside Out world looks like for a football player with CTE. I bet all his core memories is just loud crashing noises and the urge to crush someone. So the dump could represent not just what happens to your memories as they fade, but it could also represent what happens to your brain as it ages. Number 7. Dad's main emotion is anger. Eventually we get to look into the minds of some of the other characters in the movie, mainly Riley's mom and dad. Their emotions are so clean and put together, and they have everything where it needs to be. I know some people with kids, and if you took a look inside their heads, it would look nothing like that. It would be all sleep deprivation and a never-ending craving for martinis. But when we get to look inside Riley's father's head, it seems like anger is at center stage. Why is this so? Could it be because he hates his life? During the movie, we see him constantly struggling over his job. Or maybe he grew up an angry kid in a broken home. Either way, I don't like a guy with a cop mustache who mainly runs on anger. Number 6. Mom's main emotion is sadness. Sticking with the theme of what's going on inside the heads of Riley's parents, we see that Mom's brain seems to run mainly on sadness. That is dark. We also see that one of her fondest memories is a time when she almost ran off with a Brazilian helicopter pilot. I think it's safe to say that there's a huge serving of regret sitting in Riley's mom's life. Every day she's raising a little bundle of joy and holding a strong marriage together when she could be in the sun getting some strong, well, you guys can fill in the rest of the picture. Number 5. Monsters Inc. crossover. So how did Bing Bong, the king of bongs, Bing Bong, the loving imaginary friend, come into an existence? Well, it could have been that the imagination of a child is so strong that she conjured him up herself, or that Bing Bong is actually from the Monsters Inc. universe, and when Riley was a kid, he would visit her to make her laugh. I really like this theory because people have been trying to make bridges through the Pixar movies to make one giant universe. And if it's true, it means Bing Bong is actually alive and well out there somewhere. Only the memory of him died. So when you're watching this movie, you can feel a little bit warmer when that scene happens. Number 4. Different genders. If you were paying close enough attention to the layout of everyone's head in Inside Out, you might have seen a distinct difference. Well, first off, inside Riley's mom's head, we have a nice layout. Everything is cozy. While her dad's head looks more like a dimmer version of a NASA flight monitoring room. I think guys are just simpler. That's why we don't need as many things. Like, we don't need sheets on our bed to feel happy, and one towel is more than enough. But beyond that, you might have seen that all the emotion in Riley's mom's head are women, and all the emotions in Riley's dad's head are men. But in Riley's head, they have different genders. This could be that Riley has not gone through puberty yet, so she hasn't settled into who she's going to be. All the things like sexuality and gender are still yet to be determined. That would be very ahead of its time for a Pixar movie. They don't usually tend to touch on topics that sensitive. Number 3. The brain planned everything. We really get the impression that Joy is running the show. All the other emotions look up to her for advice, and she seems to be the big boss. But maybe not. Maybe it's Riley's brain running the show. Why did Joy and Sadness get sucked into long-term memory? Why does the control panel start to turn gray? This could be because it's really the brain doing everything. Joy trying to stop Riley from feeling any sadness was killing the brain. This is why the whole movie happened. All that insanity that seemed like accidents was actually the brain that had planned this to force Joy and Sadness to become better friends so Joy could see the benefit of Sadness. If the brain didn't do this, Riley would have been on her way to a mental breakdown. Number 2. Riley is adopted. It's theories like these that make me wonder if people just sit down and enjoy a movie, or if the whole movie they're sitting there with a pen and paper in hand taking notes. Like, dude, it's a Pixar movie. There are no hidden messages. Just pass me the Bing Bong and try and relax. Well, there are some good points to this one. First off, when we see Riley's parents first seeing her at the beginning of the movie, Riley's mom doesn't look like she just went through childbirth. You don't stand and hold your baby right after you ripped your vagina to your butthole. That's not how it works. You're gonna want to sit down after that. Also, both her parents have brown hair and brown eyes, while Riley is blonde with blue eyes. It really gives you something to think about. Number 1 on the list. Joy is the villain. And we're gonna wrap up this list by turning the movie onto its head. Through the whole movie, Joy is trying to control everything. She tells everyone how to act. She even shoves Sadness into a little circle. Also, she can be the supreme leader of Riley's mind. She's running the place like Fidel Castro. And even though Riley seems happy, if Joy had her way, Riley would be well on her way to be a person who can't feel anything other than joy. That means she could become a bloodthirsty murderer and still have a smile on her face. She also tries to tell people in other departments how to do their jobs. Like when she's in long-term memory, she tries to tell the little bean guys what memories to throw away. I think we can break it down that she's a control freak, and if she didn't end up sucked to the other side of the world, then she would have drove Riley insane.
Starting us off with number 10 is Pua Part 1. Now in the promotional posters for the film, Pua was everywhere, but in the film it's only in like 20% of it. First off, can I just say Pua is the cutest little pig I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's so cute and fat and small, I just want to cuddle the hell out of it. I just love cute small fat animals. Anyway, but cuteness aside, there are some pretty dark theories about why Pua wasn't there throughout Moana's adventure. The first theory is that she actually ate Pua. Think about it. At the beginning she's eating a piece of pork and loving it, and Pua's there like, I'ma go now. But this theory claims that that piece of pork was actually Pua, and she was just seeing Pua as an illusion that represented her own guilt over it. The whole movie talks about meat. They raise chickens, they encounter crabs. Takar basically looks like a burnt steak, and its name is also an anagram for steak, if anyone picked up on that. When Moana meets Te Fiti, who's essentially vegetation, she finally realizes she needs to become vegetarian. Also, Pua is short for Puaka, which is Polynesian for pork. I rest my case, Your Honor. Coming in at number 9 is Pua Part 2. Now this pig is just way too cute to not have more than one theory on it. Now another theory claims that Pua actually died very early on in the film. If you remember, Moana went out into the ocean initially with Pua and got swept away, and it was a dangerous time. Even Moana, who has semi-superpowers, nearly drowned, so it seems unlikely that she was able to save Pua and herself. I know killing animals is savage and we'd expect that from Game of Thrones, not Disney, but need I remind you of that noble lion that was murdered off a cliff ledge? And I mean, we've seen characters die and reappear in Disney movies before, so it's not that big of a deal, Mufasa being the prime example. Yes, it's still too soon to be talking about that, guys. Another theory is that Pua is just a figment of Moana's imagination, since no one else really acknowledges Pua but Moana. I feel like I'm saying her name wrong either way. And the pig is just so cute, how could you not acknowledge it? Pair that with the fact Moana doesn't seem to have any real friends other than Pua, and that the locals don't interact with it. I mean, it makes sense. At number 8 we have the heart. You'd think the main character of Moana is Moana, but I reckon it's the heart of Te Fiti. I mean, the whole movie is literally about the heart. Can anyone prove me wrong? Didn't think so. According to this fan theory from Redditor Sketches from Midgard, the heart is able to grant life to animals, vegetation, and humans, and it has a special power of protection. Now, when Maui had the heart and went up against Takar, he was struck by the lava monster and he should have died, but since he had the heart, he was safe, and instead the heart was just hurtled into the ocean. Grandma Tala gives the stone to Moana and basically dies afterwards, and so the theory claims the heart had been keeping Grandma Tala alive and safe from harm this whole time, so when she doesn't have it anymore, she's just out of here. It also explains how Moana survives the massive storm, the coconut assailants, and the realm of monsters. Are we just gonna sweep all that under the rug? I don't think so. Not under my watch. Filling our number 7 slot is Ursula. There have been so many parallels and theories drawn between The Little Mermaid and Moana, probably because they're like the only 2 Disney movies primarily focused, around the ocean. In this fan theory from Reddit user Little Dinos, he claims that King Triton and Ursula had a part to play in Moana. According to the theory, when Chief Tua crashes beyond the reef and his friend dies, that was all Ursula's doing. She was on the throne of Atlantica, and the sea being moody was because of her hatred and rage towards humans. Now you're probably wondering why the ocean was slightly more calm when Moana was sailing on it, and that's because at that point King Triton was back in charge, which allowed her a slightly safer passage, but we're just a bunch more coconut attackers. Now at number 6 is the ocean god. Now the whole movie revolves around the idea that Moana was chosen by the ocean for this journey, but according to this theory, the ocean didn't choose Moana, Grandma Tala did, and she did it so that people could become the courageous explorers that they once were. I mean, in the movie, Maui, a demigod, literally says he's never heard of an ocean god, which means one probably doesn't exist. Or on the flip side, the ocean god could be Grandma Tala herself. I mean, she dances with the ocean, she tells Moana that as a child she saw Moana get the heart of Te Fiti, even though she wasn't even born, neither was the chief. Grandma Tala is the only one that pushes Moana to go on the journey, and even after her death, she regrets putting so much pressure and danger on Moana's shoulders. Why would she feel all that guilt and responsibility over it unless she was the ocean god who chose Moana for the mission? You tell me, guys. Coming in at number 5 is Tamatua. This dude is blinged out for the gods, I swear. Well, according to this theory from the YouTuber Super Carlin Brothers, Tamatua, the cute, bejeweled crab living in the realm of monsters, may have more meat to his story than we think. First off, the concept material from the art of Moana shows Tamatua's character as a headless mythical warrior, not a crab. But what if the character was still a person in the movie, or rather used to be a person, specifically a pirate? Tamatua's song goes on and on about pirate ships, and he's obsessed with finding and keeping treasure. The crab is bloody bilingual, he speaks French, he knows all about Maui's abandonment, which could mean the two met when Tamatua was still a human. But now he just spends his time as an ancestral spirit in the cave surrounded by my university tuition 7 times over. At number 4 are Lilo, Stitch, and Moana Part 1. I've watched Lilo and Stitch so many times, I think it was either the first or second Disney movie I ever watched, the other being 101 Dalmatians, but we can agree all 3 3 movies involved are masterpieces. Now either way, according to fellow YouTuber Cruella's Fur Coat, ironic by the way, the 2 movies are connected. Now let's think about Maui for a second. He'd lived for 1,000 years before he met Moana, so hypothetically, he could easily live for 1,000 after her. That puts him in the same era as Lilo and Stitch. Now let's switch movie. Lilo was late to her hula class because she was at her weekly visit with Pudge, the fish giving him a sandwich. When asked why the hell she visits him, she says he controls the weather. Now Maui is a demigod, he's a shapeshifter, he's the ruler of the sea and wind, and can lasso the sun with his hook if he wanted. So I'd say he'd be able to control the weather pretty damn easily. So what if he shapeshifted into Pudge during Lilo's time? And I know you guys are sharp, so you're probably wondering, okay, even if that is possible, why would he go from a demigod to a fish, and why would he choose Lilo? That's coming in part 2. Filling our number 3 slot is Lilo, Stitch, and Moana part 2. So why did Maui choose Lilo? Her parents died in a car crash on a rainy night, and like I mentioned before, Pudge can control the weather. So this theory poses that perhaps Maui had something to do with the death of Lilo's parents. I mean, he is careless, he threw a boat on Moana and he tossed her into the ocean like how many times? I lost count. But what if that night he went too far and got her parents killed by accident? So in his guilty conscience, he feels the obligation to look after Lilo, and on the flip side, Lilo keeps going to him knowing he controls the weather because she wants to be on his good side and protect her family from more tragedy. I'll just leave this here, you know, just some food for thought. Now at number 2 is Moana is dead. Underlined, highlighted in bold. I thought I just, had to sucker punch this title, hit him where it hurts. According to this theory from Stick Up Kid, things were really not how they seemed at all. After Moana sets sail to find Maui, she survives a horrible storm and wakes up on the island that Maui is on. But what if she didn't survive? The theory claims the storm actually did kill Moana, but she was reborn as a demigod on the island. Now think about it. Later on, Moana can magically push a stone statue over. She can literally free dive to the bottom of the ocean to get the heart without any scuba gear, and she fights off hundreds of coconut people like it was a piece of cake. Those things wouldn't be possible for a mortal human, but for a demigod, it'd be nothing. And to confirm it further, Moana literally goes into, survives, and then leaves the realm of monsters where Maui says no mortals can go. 1 + 1 = Moana being a demigod. Come on guys. And finally, at number 1 is Maui's childhood. Now this is a bit of a story and a half, so listen up. Maui tells Moana during their voyage that his human parents abandoned him after looking at him and dumped him in the ocean instead of at least trying to raise him. The gods, having seen this, took pity on the little baby and gave him a fish hook that turned him into the demigod Maui. But this doesn't really add up. By definition, a demigod is a mortal who is the offspring of a god and a human. Maui had 2 human parents. I'm spilling all the tea right now, I swear, I'm so happy about it. So let's backtrack. The gods found Maui and gave him divine status after he was abandoned. But if mortals can only become gods after death, that means Maui wasn't saved by the gods, he was resurrected. I mean, he was a baby, he could have easily drowned in the ocean, or his parents could have suffocated him under the waves. How long does a baby survive in the ocean? I'd say about 10 seconds or less. If Tafiti can be reborn as the green goddess she was before, what's to say Maui can't come back from death either?
Starting things off, and at number 10, Nemo doesn't actually exist. I hate to be the one that burst your bubble, but as it turns out, Nemo might have been just a figment of Marlin's imagination. In Latin, the word Nemo literally translates to nobody. Do you guys think that maybe the writers are trying to add a dark element to this movie? Because if we're taking that into consideration, Finding Nemo means finding nobody. How sad is that? The Reddit user takes things one step further because it is the internet. Do you guys remember the scene where Marlin's wife and children die? Yeah, I try to block that out myself, but let's just say that all of his family actually are murdered by the Barracuda. That means Marlin had a hard time coping with his loss, so he imagined that he had a child named Nemo to help him, with his depression. How bleak is this? Marlin's wife left him, and this sad theory brings us to number 9. Forget everything you thought you knew about Finding Nemo, because, well, this theory is about to shatter everything. Reddit user Black Hat Samurai 1 believes that Finding Nemo starts off a lot differently than what we are led to believe. Apparently, everyone survived the Barracuda attack, but while Marlin was passed out, his wife realized that he forced them to move to a dangerous neighborhood and that Marlin is actually a terrible father, so the wife packed up all her fish things, took the kids, and left Marlin without saying goodbye. But she left her only child that was disabled because she felt like she wouldn't be able to take care of him. I mean, wow, is this real life right now? What the heck? I think Marlin's wife is the one that's evil and a very terrible mother. I mean, who does that? Number 8, Marlin is taking advantage of Dory. Throughout the majority of the movie, Marlin and Dory are on a crazy adventure, to find his son Nemo, right? Well, according to this theory, Marlin used to know Dory when they were younger. He always had a crush on her, but he was too scared to approach her. Over the years, Marlin became so obsessed with her, and he wanted her all to himself, so he came up with a plan to capture her. But this plan backfired, and he actually caused the accident that led to her amnesia. Once she was able to roam around the ocean again, Marlin made his move and introduced himself to her. And now he basically uses her for whatever he wants, and the sad part about it is that Dory has no idea what's truly going on. The 5 stages of grief takes us onto number 7. As it turns out, Finding Nemo doesn't have a happy ending at all. All of Marlin's family died in the beginning of the film. So in reality, well, Finding Nemo is about Marlin's struggle throughout the 5 stages of grief. First we have denial. Marlin has been suffering from denial ever since the Barracuda attack, and he refuses to believe that his son actually died in the attack. Next we have anger. This is pretty clear where we see Marlin have a ton of outbursts with Nemo. And do you guys remember when we see Nemo at the drop-off? This is the first time that Marlin realizes that Nemo has disappeared and he might actually not be alive. Bargaining comes next. This takes the majority of the movie when Marlin is desperately searching for his son, and he'll do anything to bring him back. Then we have depression, and this is pretty apparent when Marlin saw Nemo's dead body. Yes, I know Nemo was only faking his death, but Marlin didn't know that. Then we have acceptance. When Marlin is captured by a fishing net, Marlin accepts that the only way he'll be with his son again is if he dies himself. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure that I'll never be able to watch this movie ever again. It's just not the same after, hearing about this. Number 6, what really happened to the fish from P. Sherman's fish tank? The tank gang were the fish from the dentist's office. The fish that helped Nemo make it back to the ocean. But the last time we see them, they're floating in baggies at the end of the movie. I'm pretty sure that whenever we buy a fish from the pet store, they tell us that you should keep the fish in a bag and place it on top of your aquarium water for about 15 minutes and then release them into your tank just so the water levels, the temperature can get as close as possible. And according to Google, fish can survive in a plastic bag for about 7 days. I'm pretty sure the tank gang had no way of escaping from those plastic bags. Oh, and during the Finding Dory post-credit scenes, we see that the tank gang is still in the same plastic bag as the original movie, and they traveled all the way to California. Wouldn't they just run out of oxygen, and wouldn't they be starving? Oh, and their water, it has to be full of waste as well. There's no way it's that clear. So I think that the tank gang wouldn't be able to survive in real life, and I think that they actually died from either, suffocation or starvation. Either way, it wasn't pretty. Next up, number 5, we have petting zoos. This next theory is actually pretty disturbing. Apparently in the Finding Nemo universe, there are a ton of theme parks where they force mentally and physically impaired sea creatures behind cages where other fish can feed them and watch them swim around like some sort of sick and twisted petting zoo. Do you guys remember in the post-opening credit scenes, Marlin and Nemo, well, when they were swimming to school and Nemo said that he hopes his dad doesn't freak out like he did at the petting zoo? Why the heck would fish need a theme park with a petting zoo? This is kind of equivalent to having a petting zoo full of humans. I mean, that's immoral and wrong. The real synopsis takes us to number 4. How would you attempt to describe the plot of Finding Nemo? I'd probably say something like this. Finding Nemo is about a father who will stop at nothing to rescue his son from the dangers of the open water. But what if I told you guys that the real synopsis is something more like this? It's a movie about a serial killer who kills a little boy's mom and all of his other siblings. And the attack left a little clownfish with a disability, and in a sudden turn of events, the boy gets kidnapped and the dad goes on an adventure to find and save his lost son with the help of a mentally disabled woman. So you're telling me Finding Nemo is about serial killers and kidnapping. I mean, that's it. I'm officially done here. How do we get past this dark theory, and how do we watch Nemo again after learning about all this? Well, next up, number 3, we have Bruce is the son of the shark from Jaws. Yeah, that's right. Our favorite vegetarian shark, Bruce, might be the son of the shark from Jaws. Apparently in the set of Jaws, there were a bunch of shark models that were used for filming. All of them were named Bruce. In Finding Nemo, Bruce never knew his father, and it's actually pretty common for great whites to leave their infant children behind since they can swim at birth. Also, Bruce is a part of a support group that goes against being mindless killing machines. Maybe his mother told him who his father was and he vouched to never be like him. Or maybe his father left his family because he wanted to terrorize and eat humans. You know what? I'm just glad that Bruce isn't anything like his father, or else Finding Nemo would be an entirely different animation. I'm not sure Pixar would be behind that one. Dory's memory loss is caused from a traumatic incident she had when she was young, and this theory brings us to number 2. I mean, have you guys ever wondered what happened to her? Well, throughout the entire film, we obviously know that Dory is struggling with some form of amnesia or short-term memory loss, but we don't really know what happened to her. All we know is that Dory wasn't born with this condition, so what could have caused her to suffer from her debilitating memory loss? Maybe Ellen DeGeneres just forgot her lines and that's what happened. Well, one theory suggests that she was physically abused by her parents every day. She grew up in a really bad household where her parents didn't love her and they took out all their frustrations on her. So Dory could be struggling with, a combination of repressed childhood memories and a physical impairment on her brain that is causing her to lose her short-term memory. Let me know if you guys have other theories about that one in the comment section below. How did Dory lose her memory? Number 1, Marlin only wanted to find Nemo so that they can reproduce. Okay, now I can officially say that I'm scarred for life. At first we thought this is a story about a father and son relationship, but things took a turn for the worse with this theory. In a clownfish colony, a male and female are in control. So in Finding Nemo, Marlin is the dominant male and Coral, his wife, is the dominant female. But when a dominant female of the colony is removed, the dominant male will change into the dominant female. Yeah, you heard that right. A little confusing, but that's how it goes down. Clownfish are all born as a male, but they possess both female and male reproductive organs. So in the beginning of the movie, Coral and Nemo's other siblings all died, so that means that Marlin would have to change into the dominant female, and the next fish in line would be the next dominant male, that being Nemo. So essentially Marlin is searching for his son Nemo so that they can reproduce and build a new clownfish colony. That just sounds so wrong on so many different levels, and I wish I didn't research that. Kicking things off just like that, in at number 10, Nemo is a figment of Marlin's imagination. Okay, wait, what? Okay, so you're telling me that my favorite fictional fish isn't even real? Well, let's go back to the beginning of the movie when a scary barracuda attacked Marlin's clownfish family and knocked him unconscious. When Marlin woke up, he imagined that one of his eggs survived, when in reality, they were all tragically eaten. And did you guys know that Nemo literally means no man or no one in Latin? Well, I didn't know that either. I had to do a Google search for that one, but I can literally feel a piece of my heart breaking. And apparently this whole movie is Marlin's journey through the 5 stages of grief. First, we have denial. So when Marlin won't let Nemo go to school because it's not safe. Then we have anger. He yelled at Nemo for venturing off on his own. Next is bargaining. He puts up with Dory in hopes of finding his son. Despair when Marlin saw his son getting flushed down the drain. And finally, we have acceptance. We see this when Marlin learns to let go and let things be the way that they are. I mean, wow, if I ever to rewatch this movie, I'm pretty sure we're all gonna be pretty depressed. Toy Story 3 is an allegory for the Holocaust, and this takes us to number 9. This is pretty dark. To recap, Toy Story 3 was about Andy going off to college, so he had no use for his beloved toys. The intention was to put them in an attic, but somehow they accidentally ended up at the curb with the trash. Woody saved the rest of the toys, but somehow in the process, he was donated to a daycare center. Alright, so back to this dark theory. Apparently Toy Story 3 and the Holocaust have some underlying similarities. Well, hear me out. First, the toys wanted wanted to hide in the attic, which is pretty similar to Anne Frank. Then they were shipped to a daycare, which is a place where they were concentrated and routinely mistreated by children instead of Nazis. And then we have the incinerator scene, which I don't even think I need to explain. I'm not gonna go with that one because it's pretty horrifying and we're talking about a real life event that was dramatic. I mean, what were the writers thinking with this one? I don't know. Did we actually believe that no one would notice? Number 8, cars take place in the future where humans don't exist. So what happened to us? Well, apparently cars take place in a dystopian world where all of the humans have died. Is this the future of what Earth is gonna look like? You know how The Simpsons predicted a lot of stuff? Well, maybe Disney is right about this one as well. Haven't you ever wondered how these talking cars were even created? Well, according to this theory, humans have been creating smart cars that have the ability to drive themselves. Over the years, these cars got smarter and smarter until one day they said, you know what? We don't need humans anymore. They slow us down and they're just extra weight. So let's get rid of them. And that's exactly what they did in this theory. These cars went on a murderous rampage and wiped out our species. But apparently the cars take on the personality of the last person who drove it. So basically you're saying that these cars are metal ghosts of people's spirits and they're just trapped inside of these vehicles. I mean, things got super dark pretty quickly. Dopey and Geppetto are the same person, and this takes us to number 7. This theory is pretty sad and disturbing at the same time. Well, let's compare Dopey and Geppetto side by side. Okay, apart from the large age gap and me almost not remembering who Geppetto was, I'm like, Geppetto, who is that? Well, it's easy to see that they have a lot of similarities, but they also have a lot of personality traits in common as well. Both of them are kind, they're clumsy, easily confused, and they tend to get scared very easily. But let's dive a bit deeper, shall we? Let's say that originally that they were actually 6 dwarves. One day when they were out in the forest, they stumbled across an abandoned baby. They thought he was a dwarf, so they took him in. As time went on, the others started to tease and abuse him. At that time, Dopey would have been a toddler who couldn't speak yet. So that kind of explains why he's so clueless and quiet. But once the others realized that he wasn't a dwarf, they kicked him to the curb. But Dopey was in love with Snow White, even when he got older, so he made Pinocchio to be modeled after her. The puppet was supposed to represent what Dopey thought a child of theirs would look like. I mean, take a look at this picture. They actually look like they could be related. I feel really bad for Geppetto now. Number 6, Snow White and cocaine. Okay, well, you know what? I didn't mess up with this one because we have another Snow White theory on this list. By the way, have you guys tried to rewatch Snow White when you got older? Well, it's actually really painful. I don't know if I would highly recommend it, but I couldn't even make it past the part where she's singing Into the Well. But you know what, I wasn't a huge fan when I was a kid, so I guess I don't respect it now as an adult, but a lot of you guys probably love it. But anyways, getting back to the theory, the name Snow White is a metaphor for cocaine, and happy, grumpy, sneezy, dopey, they represent side effects from snorting too much of it, too much cocaine. And then we have Doc. Doc, because if you are a cocaine user, it will most likely send you to a medical professional at some point. And don't even get me started on the haunted forest scene. That was a bad trip gone seriously wrong, and maybe she was singing Into the Well and hearing voices because she was flying high. It's all starting to make sense now, actually. Was this even a kid's movie? This should have been like 18A. 18A, is that even a such thing? I think it might be a Canadian thing. Carl was dead the entire time, and this depressing theory takes us to number 5. The movie Up was already super sad as it was, and pretty heartbreaking, and now you're telling me that Carl was dead the entire time? Is this real life right now? First, his wife Ellie suffers a miscarriage, then they're told that they can never have kids. So they try to save up money for a trip of a lifetime, but when Ellie got sick, she's hospitalized and then she died. Remind me why I ever wanted to watch this movie in the first place, but now this theory is telling us that Carl died in his sleep when he got the call telling him that he might be moving to a retirement home. Apparently the entire movie is about his journey to the afterlife, and when the house rises up towards the sky, it's actually a metaphor for him going to heaven, and Russell was his guardian angel. I'm literally so heartbroken right now, I don't even know what to do with myself. Shots fired in at number 4 with Gaston killing Bambi's mother. I warned you guys, I warned you that this list, it wouldn't be easy to get through, but are any of you guys really surprised by this news? I don't think you guys are. I mean, Gaston was the real beast of the movie, and he didn't really care about who he hurt. We all know that Gaston was a really good hunter because he had so many dead animals hanging on his wall. I mean, the evidence was there. It was pretty obvious. And in one of his songs, he sang that he uses antlers in all of his decorating, which sounds super suspect to me. It's pretty suspicious. And let's not forget that at the very beginning of the film, we see a deer drinking from the river in front of a castle. Yeah, I realize that it can literally be any deer, but Disney loves throwing in Easter eggs, so it was probably Bambi's mother right before Gaston murdered her. It's a theory that could be very plausible. Next up, number 3, Sully was killed in Monsters, Inc. and was turned into a toilet seat cover. This movie is about a world full of monsters who earn a living by capturing children's screams, but in reality, the monsters are also terrified of humans. And it probably has something to do with Randall's theory that humans are known to kill and skin monsters and turn them into toilet seat covers. So if you were to watch one of the Toy Story's animated shorts, Partysaurus Rex, the toilet seat cover in Bonnie's house, it looks super familiar. I mean, why would you do this to us, Pixar? And I guess this explains why Monsters University was a prequel instead of a sequel. Mike Sully wasn't alive to do the second movie. Peter Pan might be a pedophile, and this brings us to number 2. When we first think about Peter Pan, we see a highly spirited young boy who lives in a magical world called Neverland, where children never grow up. But enough of that fake portrayal. Let's expose Peter Pan for who he truly is. First of all, he enjoys stalking little girls. When Wendy helps Peter Pan with the shadow, he reveals to her that he already knows her name, her family, where she lives, and what she does every day, because he's been watching her from her window curtains for years. Is this real life right now? Wendy should have gotten a restraining order and called the police. But then we also learn that Peter Pan goes one step further and kidnaps little boys and girls. He uses Tinkerbell and forces her to use her powers to make the children learn how to fly so that they can be able to come to the magical world. But he forgets to mention that there are killer pirates there, and he doesn't even get permission from their parents. All Peter Pan is missing is a white van and a creepy mustache. But that might be part of the sequel. Topping off this disturbing list, in at number 1, we got Peter Pan again. Peter Pan is an angel of death. So if he's not a pedophile, he might be this. What's going on with Peter Pan? Why hasn't he been arrested yet? First he's kidnapping people, and now he's the angel of death? Well, let me explain. Apparently Peter Pan is a deranged psychopath who kills lost boys when they become adults. This explains why kids never grow old in Neverland, and maybe Captain Hook was one of the good guys after all. Some even say that Captain Hook used to be a lost boy, but he discovered what Peter Pan was up to, so he was able to escape and made it his life mission to put an end to Peter Pan. Once he's done with the lost boys, he probably throws them in crocodile-infested waters.
Now let's start with number 10, Winnie the Pooh characters. The first theory on our list comes from an article published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, so pretty legit. And also, it's one of my longer forays into the material I'm studying, so buckle up. In 2000, Sarah Shea from the Division of Developmental Pediatrics at Dalhousie University wrote an article with her colleagues. This article journeys through diagnosing each of the main characters of Winnie the Pooh with different states of neurological disorders. I'm gonna give you the highlights of what the article alleges because it kind of goes in really deep. First, the title character, Winnie the Pooh, himself, they say, has ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Second, the study says that Piglet has generalized anxiety disorder, which accounts for his anxious, blustering, and flustered demeanor. Third, it says that Eeyore has chronic dysthymia, or another way of saying he has persistent mild depression, and they say this explains his negative outlook. Next, it continues to say that Owl is bright, but dyslexic. And then finally, when it comes to Tigger, the article isn't final on anything, but they try to say his behaviors are hyperactive and impulsive. This article theorizes more about possible treatment plans for even more characters, and the ones listed above, it goes into even more detail. Plus, other people online have shared other arguments for what characters represent with different diagnoses, but I could deep dive on this one theory honestly for a full 10 minutes, but we have other things to do here, and we're only at number 10 of our list, and we need to keep going. On to number 9. Frozen, Kristoff, and Sven. So let's jump to a more recent Disney production, Frozen. In Frozen, we see Kristoff in warm clothes to keep cozy in the cold climate of Arendelle, and this makes sense. People harvest ice in this movie titled Frozen, so it's bound to be cold. That's not where this conspiracy theory is. We need to take a closer look at Kristoff's wardrobe, then to his adorable reindeer sidekick, Sven, then back to his wardrobe. See anything? Any similarities? There is a theory that Kristoff wears Sven's mom's pelt, like wears it as it. Ice harvesters in Arendelle see this orphan Kristoff in blistering cold weather, so they dress him in the tanned hide of a reindeer. But these theories are suggesting that this reindeer hide is Sven's mom, because Sven doesn't have a mother in the movie either. Is Sven just a reindeer so he doesn't notice, or has Kristoff convinced him otherwise? Like, it's something to think about, people, honestly. But anyways, on to number 8, Fairly Odd Parents. Now, this show aired both on Nickelodeon and Disney XD, so it makes the list of Disney theories. Plus, it's too interesting to skip, so good enough reason for me. What this theory suggests is that Timmy's fairies in the show are metaphors for antidepressants. Now, stick with me. The evidence people use is that they arrived when his problems began, then that they are only around when he needs them, as in needing them to balance out the chemical imbalance in his brain. There was also a moment in the episode Channel Chasers when it was mentioned that they would be around for a long time, like him using them for a long time. Importantly, there are side effects when he abuses his wishing powers, just like there are side effects for abusing prescription drugs for mental health illnesses. This might get you thinking about what the other fairies represent as well, so if you think of anything cool, just let me know in a comment. I want to hear it. Number 7. Calhoun from Wreck-It Ralph. Sergeant Calhoun from Wreck-It Ralph was a badass, no doubt. But there's an element of her backstory that I looked into that may give you some pause if you're thinking of putting her on a pedestal or something. On her wedding day, Calhoun's soon-to-be husband Brad was eaten by a cybug. The thing is, cybugs turn into what they eat. So, when the sergeant was firing at the creature and we don't see the beast itself, only Calhoun's face, the reality is she may have been shooting at a cybug with Brad's face on it. And that's some emotional trauma even Fix-It Felix can't touch. Number 6. Captain Hook and Ariel. Peter Pan came out in 1953 and brought with it the notorious pirate character Captain Hook. Already the villain in his own story, could he be the villain in another? Hitting fast forward over 50 years later, The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Beginning comes out. It's a prequel to the 1989 classic and has Disney theorists bringing out that red string. The prequel revealed that Ariel's mom, Queen Athena, had been killed by pirates. And you see where I'm going with this? This is backed up by the fact that in a lagoon, we saw a bunch of mermaids, including a red-headed mermaid that looked pretty familiar in Peter Pan. So, could Hook be the leader of the crew of pirates that killed Queen Athena? Have you seen the hook on his hand? Like, I think he could do it. He's a pirate. Now, number 5. Peter Pan. Sticking to the movie Captain Hook is in, let's switch to examine Peter Pan himself. Now, this theory doesn't line up with the last one, so really, if you like this one, it kind of invalidates the last one, so you have to pick which one you believe. This one needs some history with it, so we need to get all on the same page. Peter Pan the movie is based off J.M. Barrie's titular character in the play of the same name that came out in 1904, and on the book Peter and Wendy that came out a little later in 1911. Barrie also lost his brother when his brother was only 13, so people think this may be where he got the idea of never growing up. So where does this leave Peter Pan? The theory is that he is the angel of death and that Neverland is a form of afterlife. Pulling Captain Hook into this, the pirate could be seen as the devil if you look into this as a depiction of hell in the Christian sense, is what some people have been saying, but I have my own idea about Peter Pan as the angel of death that you can stick around here at the end of the video, but my own conspiracy theory spiral will have to wait, so let's skip that and jump to a princess movie next. Number 4. Prince Charming from Snow White. When you think Prince Charming, you think the classic embodiment of everything a princess should want, but in Snow White, this character may not be what he seems. Matt Morgan, a commentator on a BuzzFeed article, equated Prince Charming to the Grim Reaper. He listed a bunch of parallels. The first time Snow White sees Prince Charming, she is scared and nearly falls into a well and dies, mimicking a fear of death. 2. Her next brush with death is a poison apple, and then this prince comes riding in on a pale white horse. At the time of the movie's release, coming in on a pale white horse was a depiction of what Death rode himself. Then 3. The kiss of death. Death kissing Snow White to literally take the breath of life from her. Death as in the prince. And yeah, there's more. Do you remember Snow White and the prince riding off into a castle that was surrounded by clouds and golden light? And the dwarfs didn't follow them, instead they said goodbye? Well, that's because Morgan's theory states that the living can't follow them into heaven or a heavenly looking afterlife. So there's a dead princess theory for you. Now it's time to switch gears. And when I say gears, I mean number 3, we're talking about cars. If you are familiar with the Pixar theory that all movies are connected, you and others will realize that there's a problem with the theory when it comes to the movie Cars. In the reality of Cars, it's a world without humans. The theory is that the human race in the future is wiped out, possibly murdered, and that cars have gained sentience. If you think this one is a little wild, don't think it's too far out there. Screen Crush interviewed Cars creative director Jay Ward, and his theory lines up. Ward theorized that Cars took over with their advanced AI and then adopted the personalities of their previous owners, took over and adopted the personalities, like, no thank you. So let's check out another theory set in the future. This one's number 2, Aladdin. Now there's quite a few theories on Aladdin, but this one floating around the internet is that it's set in a post-apocalyptic future. This theory hinges on the fact that Genie wasn't in the lamp before the 3rd century, as it uses a line from the movie to back up its claims. Genie says Aladdin's clothes are much too 3rd century, therefore he wouldn't have been in the lamp at that time. He would have been just roaming around. That time for us is the year 300 in the Common Era, which is over 1700 years ago. The thing is, Genie mentions he's been stuck in the lamp for over 10,000 years, which moves our timeline way forward. So Agrabah could be a post-apocalyptic society that goes back to not using technology and could have been inspired by old ways. Finally, this theory is also backed up by the fact that Genie makes countless references to the 20th century, and while you might tie that to the fact it's a movie that came out in 1992, I say keep to continuity. And now for the most tragic and scary theory of them all. Number 1, Carl from Up. We all know I cried at the beginning of Up. Before anything bad actually happened, the movie had me in tears. But this theory just makes it all worse. I'm just gonna say it. What if Carl was dead the entire time? When I say the entire time, I mean once he is 78 years old after the tragic montage of waterfalling tears. The theory starts when Carl decides to follow his lifelong dream of going to Paradise Falls. His balloon equation is impossible, so this theory ventures to explain that by saying all of his experiences were symbolic and he was already dead by this point. They say his trip to Paradise Falls is a journey of acceptance guided by a guardian angel, wilderness explorer Russell. When they make it back to the city, it's also a symbolic meaning of making it back into heaven. Now within this, there's also a sub-theory that says Charles Muntz is a fallen angel selling hellhounds, the talking dogs, to drag Carl into the underworld. And so do with that one what you do. And well, that's the top 10 I have for you today. And what do you think? Which ones do you think hold some merit and which ones are you not so sure about? If there's one you want me to dive into more or one I didn't even talk about or touch on, just let me know. If you like the topic of Disney, let me know if you want to see what is rumored to be scary about Disneyland or Disney World, or also let me know your favorite Disney movie because I want to have a movie marathon soon and I want to hear your recommendations. My favorite Disney movie is Tangled, and it's hard to change my mind, but you can try if you want to argue with me on that one. Oh, also, at the beginning of the video I said stick around for my theories, so let's start with that Peter Pan one, aka Angel of Death one. What I was thinking was that it might draw closer to Greek mythology. Hook would be more of a Hades character, ruler of the underworld, because Neverland would be the underworld in this case. Tinkerbell could be Charon, the ferryman that guided souls across the river Styx, or even take the word ferryman. Ferry like the boat ferry, or ferry like the Tinkerbell ferry, what I'm saying? And so where does that leave our boy Peter Pan? Peter Pan would be seen as Hermes, and Hermes isn't just a god that delivers dead souls to Charon, which in itself mirrors Peter Pan getting Tinkerbell's help to bring people to Neverland. Hermes, among other things, is also a god of trickery. Peter Pan, that's all I'm saying. So that's my Peter Pan one. And I have one more last one, just squeezing it in there, that I think that you maybe should think about with Aladdin. Maybe the timeline isn't as wild as that theory suggests. What if, instead of Agrabah being way in the future, the genie is bound to a different form of time, like a time traveler? What do you think? Maybe? Yes? No? Alright, but that's all I got for you. Thanks for tuning in. Bye!